Hello again everyone, and the latest camera lens to land in my office for testing is this specimen, the Sony FE 90mm f2.8 Macro G OSS. It's designed to be a conventional, yet very high quality, 1:1 magnification macro lens with some nice electronic features including image stabilization. Its cost is £900 in the UK or $1,100 US, so let's hope it's as good as its excellent reputation on the internet suggests. Now, macro lenses are incredibly fun, managing to get you very close to even the smallest subject for some dramatic and attention-grabbing pictures. The 90mm focal length here lets you get a little bit of distance from your subject, but not so much that you're contending with a lot of camera shake. In fact, it's really best to use macro lenses with a tripod wherever possible, as close-up photography can be a bit shaky and tricky handheld. But at least this lens does have image stabilization to help out with that. The lens's quite bright maximum aperture of f2.8 also lets you get quite nicely out of focus backgrounds, so macro lenses such as these traditionally double up as a portrait lens in use. Well, let's start off by looking at its build quality. The lens is really cool and unique looking, and it's solid too, with a metal body weighing about 600 grams. There seem to be mixed claims on the internet about its level of weather sealing. One thing I can tell you is that it certainly doesn't have a weather sealing gasket around the rear mount. There are controls for autofocus and image stabilization on the side of the lens, as well as a focus hold button. Here's how the image stabilization performs at normal distances when turned on. As you can see, it performs fairly well, with a tiny bit of drifting. I should warn you that at very close focus distances, it'll be a lot less efficient than this. This lens's more unique feature is that cool focus ring at the front. If you want to shoot in autofocus, simply push it forwards, and turning the ring won't do anything at all, and you'll work in autofocus mode. To switch to manual focus, pull the ring down and the focus motor will electronically move itself to the position indicated on the lens barrel. It won't stay in the position you autofocused to, but the ring does at least turn really smoothly and precisely. It's also possible to push the focus ring up to shoot in autofocus mode, but then pre-adjust the manual focus distance at the bottom, ready for when you decide to switch back again. An interesting feature, but probably not one you'll use all that often. The manual focus ring is electronically coupled to the focus motor. It works quite responsively, but one thing you will notice is some absolutely enormous focus breathing. The lens zooms way in as you focus more closely, which will make it difficult for video makers to work with. The lens's autofocus motor is accurate, reasonably quick, and silent. No complaints here. The lens comes with quite a deep hood and its filter size is 62mm. Overall, I loved its excellent build quality, although sometimes that wild focus breathing would take me by surprise as I composed my images. Alright, let's move on now and look at image quality. We'll start by testing on a full frame camera, my 42MP Sony A7R II. At f2.8, the lens is absolutely razor sharp in the middle of your images with biting contrast. The corners of the image also look pretty astounding. This is truly excellent image quality. There are minuscule improvements at f4 and f5.6. It's only at f16 do we see a tiny reduction in contrast and resolution due to diffraction, and f22 is a little ghostly for the same reason. So, it's basically a perfect performance here on full frame, even on a 42MP camera. Let's see about the performance on Aps-C by mounting the lens onto my 24MP Sony A5100. It's basically the same. f2.8 is virtually perfect in the middle and over into the corners too, although just a smidgen of colour fringing is visible there at f2.8. Stop down to f4 to see perfection. On the smaller Aps-C sensor, now it's at f16 that the slight softening effect of diffraction becomes truly visible. So, it's virtually a perfect performance on Aps-C too. Nice. Well, let's see about distortion and vignetting on a full frame camera if you're shooting in RAW or with corrections turned off. Distortion is negligible, but vignetting is a little noticeable at f2.8, stop down to f4, and those corners brighten up right away. So it's a great performance here, really. Next, close-up image quality, of course. As it's a macro lens, I have a special subject for you here. This 50p piece commemorating the liberation of the Falkland Islands. I'm pleased to say that at f2.8, macro image quality is really excellent, and stop down to f4 for just a tiny edge of extra contrast there. It stays this sharp all the way down to f11, which sees a tiny softening. The effects of diffraction kick in a little sooner at closer focus distances. f16 is soft, f22 really quite bad. Still, at nearly all apertures though, it's an amazing macro performance here. Let's see how the lens works against bright lights now. Macro lenses do not normally appreciate bright lights very much, although the Sony lens is a bit more controlled than average. Flaring is there, but it looks quite nice and soft. Next up, bokeh. The quality of this lens's out of focus background seems averagely soft to me. Nothing especially smooth, but certainly no real problems here either. And finally, let's take a quick look at longitudinal chromatic aberration. As you can see, at f2.8, the lens shows some green and purple fringing on bokeh highlights. That will quickly go away as you stop down the aperture though. Well, there you go. There's not much more to say other than that the Sony FE 90mm macro is just about the perfect macro lens. In fact, I look at some test chart pictures from other macro lenses I've tested, and this one beats all the rest. Although it was a close call against the Venus Optics 100mm 2:1 lens. In fact, depending on your needs, I'd say that lens is a nice alternative to consider. It can focus twice as closely, has less longitudinal chromatic aberration, and costs only half the price. Then again, the Sony lens is fully electronic, with autofocus and image stabilization, making it a lot easier to work with, and it's very marginally sharper too. Enjoy making up your own mind over which one to choose, but in the meantime, the Sony 90mm macro wins the prize as the highest resolution macro lens I've ever tested, and so it comes highly recommended.